So,
true.
so things are busy, man. I mean, I know the album with Tony and then the all night trio. There's a lot going on, so I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I'm trying to think. I know that we spoke a couple times over the pandemic, but I can't remember the exact last time, but at least we'll have a nice context. So, with that being said, I'm curious now in 2025 that the dust is settled on this pandemic and we're truly back at it. Albums are coming out. How
Hmm.
did you ultimately, how did living through the pandemic alter or refine your approach as a musician, producer, and everything that you're doing as a traveling musician?
Well, the pandemic, actually, the last time we spoke was from as a result of my album, A Change for the Dreamlike,
Yes.
was a direct result of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Um, so that experience where I created a whole album on my own, in the French countryside, having people send me music or their parts from, far away, and also kind of self-producing it in the sense of like actual production, and recording, um, definitely influenced me in terms of possibilities of what I can do. Um, but also, it's hard to say, but that was, like I said, that was a time of reflection. So I definitely was like really kind of reflect on who I am as an artist and how who I am as a person reflects in my art, and digging in deep into my history and my roots, um and all my influences and all that kind of stuff. That was really, so definitely in a musical sense too, it was influencing me. In terms of playing, I wasn't getting to play obviously, but
Yeah.
it's back full force, so
Yeah.
full force rather.
You know, I've been dying to ask you about this. When you came back to Kansas City, that show was so like I haven't felt that level of energy, the kinetic melding of like all of the cats that you knew and played with and that were mentors from Bobby on down and just everybody that was like, all right, our guy's back. He came back from Europe. He's playing a show. That had to be surreal, man, to go through that experience.
It is definitely my favorite show I've ever done, and it really did feel like this homecoming, and the audience was so, this is at the Folly Theater, the audience was so warm, and we played a kind of a like retrospective of all the music I've released, and the band I had was very, very special. It was just an incredible night.
It would have to be coming from playing with like Peter and people that you've known throughout your life. It would almost be like they're grounding rods when you're in that moment. Like you're looking over and you're seeing a friend. Like because so much of that is like, wow. Like I think about like all of those early years when I used to watch the Grammys and big performers would play in front of their heroes, and you're just like, wait, wait, wait. Like there's got to be a part of you that grounds yourself because you
Hmm.
are an artist and you are performing. But when you're looking on at these legendary figures like Bobby Watson and all these cats looking in, you have to keep all of it in perspective because you're creating music and putting on a show.
Absolutely, and it does help to have someone next to me or behind me that I've known since I was 16 years old, and who I just feel super comfortable with on stage. Like it just feels at home.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about Soul Song. I know you and Tony have done work before. What's that relationship like? How did this album come about? How did it all kind of come to fruition?
Actually, yeah. So that's a similar thing in the sense that I've known Tony since 2010, which was my first time in Paris. Uh, it wasn't the first time in Paris. It was my second. I came to Paris twice in
Yeah.
2010. My second time, I got to play with Tony in another group, and that's how we met. So I've known him 15 years at this
Yeah.
point. One of my closest friends, and so when we play together, it feels very like that friendship comes through, especially in this intimate duo setting, which was proposed to us by Antoine Rajon,
Yeah.
who is a producer for the label Comos, and he's kind of like also like the artistic director of the label. Um, and he's the one who produced my last record, Asmara. He came to me with this idea because he knew both of us, and he had us play a festival in the French countryside, last summer, and it went over super well. And we were just talking about it, and we said, we haven't me and Tony have known each other for so long. We've not done a collaborative project. And so Antoine had us come over to his place. He wanted to do it in a like very raw, first takes only, to analog tape,
Yep.
high fidelity, and so we did it in his living room. We had this great engineer come from Lyon, who brought all this amazing equipment, and we recorded the whole thing in his in Antoine's living room in the French countryside.
And the name Soul Song, I mean, it just kind of epitomizes what you say, you know. I mean, it's like it's coming from the soul, your friends, you're in a new home. There just seems to be so much warmth that comes out of that title.
Absolutely, yeah. The whole kind of focus of this was, or theme even, was just that are like brothers and there's a lot of love between us, and we wanted to make a record that showed that as well. And so even the song selection, and then we both kind of wrote a couple songs for this as well with the same thing in mind.
I'm going to undulate between this album and the All Night Trio. And the thing about the All Night Trio is the first time Matt Villinger put out that first record, I could not stop listening to that. The level of like electronica, the level of jazz, the acumen. I mean, you go down the whole sheet. If you're analyzing music from a classic perspective and bridging the past and the future or the modern, it just hit everything. It's
Mm.
such good music. And to me, it's like it should be national. It should be winning awards. It should be. I mean, I know that I'm preaching to the choir, but there's something special about what's going on, and for you to be a part of this project, it's stellar, man.
Yeah, I'm always super excited to get that email or call from Matt saying, "Hey, I wouldn't really want you to play on a song or two on my next project." I've been a part of it since his first record. He's putting these out, and they're all super high level, super amazing. And I agree. I try to tell people about the All Night Trio and what Matt's doing around the world. When I meet people, I say, "Hey, you should check this out. Check this out." Because the unfortunate part is that Kansas City doesn't export very well, so people don't get exposed to it, and so I'm trying. And also, I know Matt very well, and I think Matt could do a lot better job with his promotion.
You know, they had a movie that just came out. I don't know if you've heard about it. It was on Amazon. Trying to remember the name of it. I'm gonna have to look it up. But there was a movie that like looked at the Kansas City scene. And it
Mm,
went from like the beginnings of Bird and kind of into McShann. And Lonnie McFadden was on there talking about how McShann probably was the first person that came up with rock and roll. Kansas City might be where rock and roll began, right? Kind of
mm.
before, all of those early kind of mix of R&B and rock was happening. My point is this, I came away from the movie and I loved it because there were so many people. Chuck Haddock was in there. There were so many voices. It was so Kansas City centric. You just oozed with it. And when you've lived here, you know that. You feel it. It's warm. But
Yeah,
there's an imposter syndrome. That's the thing that just absolutely blew me away about it. Kansas City's always had it. We've always been there, but we're always put up against these big cities, New York and LA and in Europe and Paris and all these places. And it's like you're saying with Matt, these albums should be in downbeat, totally profiled, totally picked apart. And I
absolutely.
know I'm biased, but I really believe the artistry, like Peter Schlam, is like one of the greatest multi-instrumental cats in jazz today.
For sure. He's not the best. I mean, I love Peter. Just obviously, but I'm biased too. But I know many people who are the great artists of this of the jazz world, who are really well known, who are very famous, who know Peter and know that to be true as well. So I really feel like all this music needs, when we're talking about Matt or Peter, is just the right exposure. The right people need to hear it.
Yeah.
The right exposure, and it would just, because it is special too. That's the thing about Kansas City, is that um what they're doing is original in the
Mhm.
sense that, like, it's not following trends. What happens on the coasts is that you have people on the West Coast who are following, have created identities and sounds, but there's trends following that. And the same on the East Coast in New York. You have certain trends, and you have like someone like Emmanuel Wilkins, who sounds great,
Yeah.
but you have that, he's completely coming out of a thing that's straight up what Ambrose did before.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of people who are less well known, but a lot of people on the East Coast are doing the same thing. and but you find what Matt's doing, and it's really like its own thing, and what Peter's doing, it's really its own thing, but it's just not being heard,
It's
right?
totally organic. You know, you were one of the first interviews I did in 2010, and I was trying to wrap my head around how Kansas City fits in the lexicon and just the whole jazz landscape. And after doing it now for almost 15 years, what you guys are doing, all of you cats, Zach, Peter, Matt, all of you guys are doing this in a very organic way. You guys, to me, which has been my philosophy on Neon Jazz, is you're building this bridge from we know that this is where classic, this is where the old world of jazz came from, that honey dripping 50s, 60s movement. But we also know that there's this whole philosophy of Miles where we have to move forward. The dot has to spread. We have to evolve as artists. We have to push this genre forward. And you guys are doing that. Like with like the electronic tinks, that sound is so unique. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
even what Villinger's doing, what you guys are all doing, the way that you're playing the horn, it's like it all seems like such a organic yet evolved thing. Has that been a conscious thing that you've been trying to do in your career?
Um, More subconscious than conscious, but
Okay.
I am conscious of it. Um, and like I said, it's interesting when you're not surrounded by the New York scene, in a sense, or the LA scene, and you have your own thing going. I never lived in these places. So my whole concept came of just what I wanted to do. And without really being super influenced by the trends that were happening. It was funny because I remember way back when Peter came back and moved back to Kansas City, he heard me play and he was like, man, it was really, for me, it really made, because I didn't think about it this way, but he said, he told me that you have your own thing, and it's because you didn't go to New York in these formative years.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of this stuff is subconscious, happens subconsciously, and um, yeah, but absolutely, I agree though that there's a sound. Everyone's have this sound, but here's the thing that Kansas City has and has always had, and I've always said this, um, is that it's always has like the heart, you know, like even like Charlie Parker's music was so amazing and so forward thinking. Um, and some people like to dissect it intellectually, and you obviously can, but what makes it really work is that it had
Yeah.
so much heart, you
Yeah.
know? And so on. Pat Metheny's music has a lot of heart in it, you know?
You're
It,
totally right.
it's the same thing. Peter's music and Matt's music is still like whole soulful and has heart, and it's not like totally intellectual and totally abstract, and it's really grounded. Logan Richardson, it's the same thing, so it's that's how I feel about the Midwest and specifically Kansas City.
You know, and I think there's a social consciousness about it. I think that's the big thing. Like, I remember one time I was in front of the Mutual Musicians Foundation, and Chuck Haddock was telling me a story about how Charlie Parker walked up a specific street with a bucket of chicken, and he was talking and he was getting into things. And all these stories that I hear about Kansas City have a social context to it, like being in the basement of the Majestic, or, Logan coming back to the Blue Room, and you hop up on stage with them, and all of those things, and how you cats come together and have a friendly, open nature. I think all of that creates the heart, the soul, the social context of having real soul that's beyond money, that's beyond stature. It's
Mm,
just the reason why jazz is something that hits and moves us the way it does.
mm, absolutely, absolutely.
So I'm curious, how much of living in Europe and Paris has enhanced your love of Kansas City and vice versa? How much of being in Kansas City has enhanced your experience of being a European musician now?
Um, okay, so first part of the question is how much is being in Paris? Sorry, I
Yes, so
split
yeah, I'm sorry,
my
I should have
mind.
split that up twice. Sorry. So being in Paris, how much of living there and being out of the Kansas City day to day has enhanced the way that you look at Kansas City and appreciate what was going on here all the
Oh
time?
yeah, yeah. Like a lot of what I've already said with the heart thing and musicians playing in this way. The tradition is very strong in Kansas City, in the States in general, especially compared to the US. I mean, the music comes from the US, so there's that already. But
Yeah,
Kansas City has had these generations of musicians, and one of the things that's really missing in the European scenes, because I've gotten to know a lot of them now at this point, on a very grassroots level even, is the connection between the generations of transmitting to the next generation. and receiving from the previous generation. It doesn't really exist in Europe. It's not a thing. And there's a big part of this music because it's a folk music more than anything. You know, we have it we have it in academic circles and schools and stuff like that. But the scene is just as important to developing musicians, um, which is why Kansas City is special because it's one of the few places, even in the U.S., that has a real scene, a vibrant scene of lots of musicians and of different generations and standards that have been set. Not no pun intended, you know, but it's there's a way of playing that you have to kind of come through and learn, um, and that doesn't exist. Paris has a huge jazz scene, has a huge music scene, lots of places to play, lots of stuff happening, but it's a kind of a free for all thing, right? And it's not really grounded in the way it is in the States, but it makes sense because it's in American music. And then the second part of the question,
I think you answered it. It's just the way that, um, living in Kansas City and being in the Midwest American kind of vibe, how that groomed you to appreciate being in a European center where jazz is appreciated in a different way.
yes, yes. Um, it is definitely, like I said, appreciated a different way. Now, what's cool about Paris, beyond opportunities and the fact that it's an amazing city and all that, when it comes to audiences, they are great. It's they you have people of all generations coming out to hear jazz music, listening, right? Like lots of listening situations happening. Um, and also casual situations where people talk us up, but they like the vibe, but they're kind of listening and kind of not, you have that as well. But you have lots of places to play where you can be listened to, which unfortunately there's less and less of that in Kansas City as I've seen recently. Um, at, I feel like when I was around, at least like Take Five was around, and the Blue Room was really good about making sure it was a listening room.
Yeah.
Um, we had Jardines for a minute. There's certain things, and certain places. Obviously, you have the big places Westbrook Coffee House, but you have the big places like Folly, Gem, which are big shows. But you know, uh, it's been great. At least here, in terms of audience appreciation is huge, which is
Yeah.
ironic,
Yeah.
But
So when coming from this perspective of interviewing about albums, it's like it's in the rear view. You go through recording, post-production, promotion, all these things. So by the time you're talking to me, it's like all of that real like being in the soup is kind of evaded and you're going into a new project. How fun is it to psychologically step back into these projects and really dig in to how you felt and how you created it?
it's always kind of surreal. Um, this one Soul Song came about the most organically, the most fluidly, right? And like with the least amount of, comparatively to my other projects, least amount of like forethought, and even the process itself was rather quick. We got a mix and master quick, have someone else taking care of the promotion for me. In terms of like it was like pretty easy, but it's still always surreal that it's like, oh look, and I'm like looking at a vinyl or something like this whole thing is like done and it's beautiful and it's great and it's being well received and it's just it's but yeah, and then you start thinking about what's next.
Yeah. So do the European audiences, I know in Japan it happens a lot. Do they like to bring vinyl and get it autographed at shows?
Yeah. I saw this past week I played with a great piano player, Rob Clearfield,
Yeah.
who is originally from Chicago, but
He
now
was
lives in
just on
France.
the show. Yeah, he's great, man.
Cool. And
Yeah.
we were celebrating his album release, which I'm not on, but he had me on a tour,
Yeah.
and we were playing in Belgium, and someone came with a vinyl of Soul Song and
That's
wanted me to
cool,
sign it.
dude.
It wasn't even my gig. It was just, yeah. So it happens. It happens.
How does that feel? I mean, to this day, you're a professional musician, you've grown so much over the years, and you put that pen down onto the album. What does that mean?
It's always super meaningful. Just anyone who appreciates what I'm doing is really touching me. But yeah, I'm not, I'm doing it. The music is not mine. It's
Right.
for all of you. It's for everyone else. And
Yeah.
so when someone appreciates it, I'm really happy. So.
So everybody always itches to see you back in Kansas City. How does that work for you? Do you have anything coming up? What's your philosophy on, traveling. I mean, it's a long, I think musicians, the older they get, the travel just gets to be more and more intense. What is that like for you? And do you have any shows coming up here?
Yeah, the travel in general is intense, but it's mostly what I do. I always say like the gigs are free, the concerts are free, playing is free for us. We're just being paid to travel.
That's it. That's it.
Um, Kansas City is funny to it's funny to navigate because yeah, there's always so many people who want to see me, and I never have enough time. Um, I came back for a friend's wedding recently, but I didn't even announce I was coming. I mean, a couple people like Peter knew, but I didn't like say I'm coming because I was in town for 2 days.
Yeah.
um, but shows I don't have any shows planned. My strategy is to at least play in Kansas City once every year and a half.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd like to align it with something special, not just do a random show. Um, eventually, eventually get some of these projects that I've been working with to Kansas City. I came back and played Alessandro. We did the duo at the 1900,
Yeah.
um, which that was our album Arc Fiction that we have together. And yeah, so if I could also bring some of these European friends that I've made and come
Yeah.
back, for them it'd be cool to see and experience Kansas City, and also it's a way to special thing because Kansas cities can kind of also experience part of my life, the things
Yeah.
I'm doing here as well.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. At the end of the day, whenever someone comes up to you and they're like, "Hey, where are you from? Where'd you learn to play?" All that, and you throw Kansas City out. What's the general reaction when you say Kansas City to people in Europe?
They're generally pretty shocked because they're used to hearing New York,
Uh-huh.
Mostly they hear New York and they're almost and they so but did you they're like so you from but did you live in New York and then come to Paris? No. I came from Kansas City. And then I have to do a little bit of educating. Like I say, okay, Cal Basie, Charlie Parker. And they're like, oh yeah, of course. Then they start thinking about it,
Yeah.
like, yeah. And I guess a lot of people maybe don't realize that is they've had all these great musicians in the past, but it's been a thing that's been kept going, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can point to other scenes and it's not quite the same.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I hear that. I feel that when people say Kansas City, there's this instant, oh yeah, that's one of the cradles. That's like New Orleans. It just
Yeah.
rings the bell. So one thing we did learn from the pandemic is the best place to get this music to support you. Is Bandcamp the place?
Bandcamp is always a place for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, Definitely the best way, I would say. Yeah.
And for your itinerary for all of the shows that you consistently do and anything else, previous albums, where's the best place for people to go to dig into everything?
My website, which is just hermonmehari.com.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Hermon, it's so great to catch up. I mean, the beauty of this post-pandemic thing is that we can see each other now.
Yeah.
That's the Zoom outgrowth. So it's great to catch up with you. Thank you so much, and keep doing. Hopefully, we'll run into each other here in the next couple years again, and do it
Yeah.
again.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Cool. Thank you, man.